What interested you in working abroad? What led to that?
Yeah, so with this question, I might have more of a different answer than Nina and Abby because I'm actually Thai American. And so I spent most of my life growing up in Thailand. So when the choice came to work abroad after I got my master's and after I worked for Vanderbilt a few years, it was an easy choice to return to Thailand. But that said, my company, FHI 360, we have an international presence. So like Abby and Nina have said, same thing with me with morning and evening calls with our US and Africa offices. And so that said, it feels, and the field that I work in is global public health. And of course, in the name, global public health does have a global presence. And so after working for a few years at Vanderbilt, I thought, you know, it's time to come home and time to come back and serve my community. So that was just mainly a big push just to come back and work with my community, work with Thai colleagues, and also colleagues across Asia. So that's mainly my impetus, but might be different from Nina and Abby.
Nina, for you?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get off mute here. Yeah, so for me, it was really one of those things where both my husband and I have just always really loved to travel and really wanted to, just experience other places. I've moved around a lot in the U.S. For working with a previous company in a previous role, and he had kind of moved around some, going to law school and things like that, and so we were just of that mind where, hey, if an opportunity ever came up, we would definitely want to do it. And then it kind of fell in our lap, and Hong Kong was never a place that we talked about. And I remember kind of going home and being like, so I got this opportunity. I don't know how you're going to feel about it. And he was like, let's do it. And I was like, well, no, they're going to send us there first to make sure, you like it. He's like, oh, okay, well, let's do it. So when we got there, he was like, let's do it. Like, let's just go. We wanted to raise our kid, kids now, but we wanted them to have an understanding of more global perspective and different cultures, and just really wanted to, give them all the opportunities to interact with, just all the different cultures and have that better understanding. And Hong Kong is such a global and diverse city that it was easy for us once we saw there's so many different people from Europe and from China and from other Asian countries. It's really a unique place. So it was an amazing experience. I think Abby said that earlier, but it really has been.
Yeah, and my story, I think Nina and I actually have maybe similar career paths. So my background is of New York City because I'm originally from New York. So it's my way to stay connected. And so after, undergrad, I moved back to New York and worked there. It was during the financial crisis, and then went to graduate school. And my husband's from the West Coast. He's from Seattle, and I'd lived in California previously, and so I felt like I had sort of experienced a bit of the different elements of the U.S. Of living in different areas in the U.S. And I'd always been interested in travel and living overseas and working with global colleagues. And so when I was looking for a job after graduate school, I was purposely targeting international companies or companies that had an international presence. And Nissan just happened to be sort of a good fit. And I started with them. And then about 3 years in, they approached me about going overseas. Originally, I was actually hoping I was going to go to Hong Kong. At the time, our Infiniti is our luxury brand, as many of you probably know, and their headquarters were in Hong Kong. So I was really excited about that. And then they said, well, what about Japan? Because Hong Kong is, a really fantastic city. It's just like New York. So I was super excited. And then they said, what about Japan? And Japan, I was a little, honestly, I was a little nervous just because culturally it's very different. And it's even very different from the rest of Asia. And it's tough. It's a tough assignment. And so, but I was, I talked myself up. Like Nina, I went home and talked to my husband and said, what do you think? And he said, well, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I mean, we can't say no. So, I have a very good partner who's willing to sort of entertain my crazy ideas of moving across the world. And so we did that, and yeah, it's been really, really rewarding. So that's a bit of our journey of how we got here.
Oh, that sounds great. And so it sounds like how you all obtained your work with Kelly, you're a dual citizen, so is you had access to work eligibility in that country. And then Nina and Abby, it sounds like you chose a job that had an international presence, and then were able to move up in a situation where you had the opportunity to travel pretty much. Yeah. And so I was curious now, I'm sure your companies helped you out with this, more so for Nina and Abby, but what did the process of obtaining work eligibility in your country look like for you? Kelly, if I don't know if like you pretty much, I don't know if you need to answer this question, but Nina and Abby, I would love to hear that from you.
Yeah, so from my standpoint, it wasn't too challenging. Luckily, because we had a lot of I wasn't obviously the first expat for Asurion, so that a lot of people had done this before, and we had sent a lot of people over to Hong Kong even before. So there was kind of a clear sort of path already laid out as far as like the documents needed and all that stuff. It was a bit, maybe a lot for me at the first time, like kind of figuring it out, but as far HR really helped kind of take care of a lot of the hurdles around getting the right letters and getting the government kind of prepped and all of that stuff submitted. So I didn't have too much to do with that. There are some like things where right when you get over there, you have to get a Hong Kong ID card, and you have to get that within 30 days of being there. And so there's a lot of organization that's required. But as far as the job requirements, I think it was more like it just has to be, they just have to have an understanding of your role and how it's not a role that exists today, and sort of what's your time frame, and you sort of get granted. I think every year I had to get a new an updated sort of membership or visa, or an updated visa. My first one was for 2 years, and then we extended it a year. So yeah, essentially, if you go to a company that has international assignments, like Abby was saying, a lot of times they sort of have a lot of that worked out. So there's not too much for you to have to worry about. If you're trying to do it on your own, it's probably a little bit more challenging and just trying to figure out what rules and requirements there are. But I'm sure that there's a lot of resources these days that probably spell all that out for you if you wanted to explore that.
Yeah, and my path is similar to Nina's, in that the company, when you're with a company that again does these expatriate assignments often, it's a pretty well-oiled machine. I mean, the company is sponsoring your visa, so they're the ones who are sort of sponsoring your assignment overseas. So they'll help quite a bit in making sure that you will have all the necessary paperwork. And when we arrived in Japan too, it's a lot of Japanese, as probably everyone can imagine. So there's even someone who goes along with you who can help translate. And for my company, they started language classes even before we left. So even before we came overseas, so we at least maybe could, do a few things and order a beer when we got here. But yeah, so, they do quite a bit of things to try to help you and to support you in finding a place to live and everything. As Nina said, I think if you're doing it on your own, it's not impossible, but it is a bit trickier. And sometimes what I see people doing is, getting at least in through some organization. So in Japan, for example, many people come here to teach English first, right? And then they sort of use that as a way to then transition maybe to something in more of the corporate world. Or there are other countries that are just a bit, maybe easier in terms of eligibility. Singapore, for example, is a bit more flexible in terms of outside and visa sponsorship and things like that. So it's just, again, about sort of exploring the areas where you may want to work. Again, where, if there's some language requirement, it's helpful to be cognizant of that. Japan, for example, is a bit tricky if you're going into the market on your own and you don't speak any of the language. There can be some roadblocks. Again, it's not impossible, but it can be a bit tricky. So, but my path was through company sponsorship.
Definitely makes it easier because there's a lot of fine print to read in those situations from what I've seen anyway. And then so this next question, um, it's essentially, what were some of your expectations versus your realities of working abroad? And now, Kelly, again, I know you were there as a child, but I'd still be interested to hear your perspective
Yeah.
just from working in America for a while and then going back. What were some of those expectations versus reality?
Sure. And I might answer that question first about living in Bangkok, because I actually didn't grow up in Bangkok. I grew up in Chiang Mai, which is in the northern part of Thailand. So working in Bangkok and like expectations versus reality, to be honest, growing up, my family and I didn't like Bangkok at all. We would only visit to go to visit family. But other than that, we avoided Bangkok. So working in Bangkok and moving and living in Bangkok definitely surprised me at the beginning, because like any part of Thailand, if you visited, there's just there's tourist spots everywhere. Thailand is a very touristy country, but once you start living, you notice the little routines that, you know, local Thai people, like little shops, little coffee shops, smaller restaurants around the corner that you don't notice when you're a tourist or when you're just visiting for a short time. So little by little, I started exploring Bangkok as a local Thai, and that was really rewarding and very special. I found I'm a coffee shop person, so I found some favorite coffee shops very similar to Nashville, like the vibes, very welcoming. So that was very special for me. And I really was drawn to the eclectic international atmosphere in Bangkok. It's the most international city in Thailand, with people honestly from all over the world. So all the time there were art festivals and museums featuring art and work and music from all over the world. And that was something I never thought was possible. So that was really special. And I think in terms of working specifically, this is just extracurricular now about work specifically. I felt like the biggest shift for me coming from an American workspace like Vanderbilt, very academic, very research heavy. The institute I was working in, the Clinical and Translational Research Institute, very hierarchical. And I mean, I had a very good time, but just shifting from that kind of like academic hierarchical atmosphere to a Thai work culture, which of course still has its hierarchies, but a lot more informal. Like being in the office, I would have colleagues walk by my office and offer food like at least 3 times a day, because Thailand is huge about street food. And so if you leave our office building and walk down, there's a huge market. There's a market in the office, like underneath the ground floor. So there's a cafeteria down there as well. There's food everywhere. So in the office, there's always food. There's always people kind of like talking in the hall and laughing. And it's a very friendly work environment. I would say honestly more so than my work environment at Vanderbilt. So that was a fun aspect of transitioning to work in Thailand. And another part, and for this question, I did talk to my American colleagues as well to give you all a most accurate representation. But some of my American colleagues also said that when they first transitioned to working in Thailand, they noticed that, and I would agree with this as a Thai American, that Thai people are, at the beginning, they're more reserved and more quiet and shy. Not all of them, but definitely most Thai people, when they first work with you, it's because they don't know you, just like anyone, they're generally more reserved. But once you get to know them, oh my goodness, like they're some of the loudest and like most extroverted people, at least in my office. I would consider myself an introvert, and yeah, it's very, once you get to know these Thai colleagues, it's like a very loud and fun work environment. So that was just another surprising and fun thing about working.
Wow, I want to work in your office. People giving you street food 3 times a day. You're selling me. Yeah, this is great.
Oh, yeah, my my office wasn't quite that. So remind me, Alex, just make sure I know the question one more time. Was it just the difference between my experience and my expectations? Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty
Okay.
precisely, yes.
Okay. Just making sure because I was like, I was just listening to Kelly and I was like, wait, I forgot what I was supposed to answer.
I got lost in the food talk as well.
I know, I know. So yeah, I think expectation wise, I mean, I wasn't really sure what to expect, I guess, to be honest, because, you know, I wasn't really close to anyone that had done an expat assignment in Hong Kong specifically before at Asurian or other companies. And so it wasn't like there was a number, while we've done expat assignments before, they're not super common. And so there wasn't a ton of people that were actively on one that I knew well, or that had just come back from one or anything like that, where I felt like I could talk to and get kind of all the insider information. I had one colleague who was over in Tokyo that I sort of knew, and now I'm much closer to, but at the time I didn't know him well. And so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I mean, as far as getting over there, I mean, I remember first getting there, and like I said, I had a young child, and I remember we got into like a service or a furnished apartment, and like I was just trying to get everyone fed and everyone kind of everything figure out where we were, where we, you know, what was around us. And I remember after like 2 days, I was feeding my son and he was like, I need peas. I need a vegetable. And I was like, have I not fed you any vegetables in like 3 days? And so we got to find a grocery store. We can't just keep eating takeout. And it's just little things like that about just trying to navigate your way around and get comfortable in your surroundings that's always, you know, a challenge. I'm sure most of you have traveled even are very familiar with that. But as far as working environment, I again had kind of a unique situation because I wasn't going into an office necessarily all the time every day with the same kind of people. I did a lot of traveling, and so expectation wise from a work environment, the only thing that I'll say is that because I mean they tend to start later there. I mentioned that, but like the coffee shops don't even open until like 7 a.m. And so like there were a few times where I had calls and I'd be up and out by like 6. I'd be like, are you kidding me? I can't even get a coffee. It's not that early. So it, you know, little things like that kind of throw you for a loop. But for the most part, I mean, I was more walking into an unknown of like, well, we'll just figure this out as we go. So I wouldn't say I had too many expectations necessarily already set up, but I don't know, Abby might have another experience than me in that department.
I was going to say, Nina, 7 a.m. There's a coffee shop here. Well, they opened I think it's in the US too, but the Blue Bottle, like the Blue Bottle coffee. And so they opened one in my neighborhood and it didn't open until 10 a.m. And right. I was like, who needs coffee at 10 a.m.? Like,
then I'm like, oh, so trying to maintain your schedule is kind of tough because I mean, in Tokyo too, people stay up so much later and I'm still in bed because I've got a small kid, you know, I can't stay up late. So that's tough.
Yeah, exactly. So, so when I was in the US and working with Nissan, I worked a bit with some of the Japanese colleagues. So I had some understanding of maybe the cultural elements, and Nissan actually does a really good job of, before you leave, providing you with some cultural training as well. As Nina probably knows, because she's worked over here a little bit, part of the workplace is almost ceremonial in some of the practices that are done. You know, there's a very big emphasis. It's also a very culturally, the context is very different. So the US is a very low context culture, and Japan is a very high context culture. It's very hierarchical. The US tends to be more egalitarian. Japan is very consensus driven. So there's just like all of these elements that are very, I guess, you know, it can make particularly Americans feel a bit lost in the workplace when you first arrive. So they provide you with some good cultural training. And there's also a really great book called The Culture Map. That if you are ever thinking about working overseas or just are interested in the way that different cultures operate, it's a great read. So, you know, part of it is just sort of, I guess, preparing yourself that it's going to be a bit different. and getting attuned with a few of those things so it doesn't become as a surprise. But I think, one of the things that, one of the things when I first arrived, honestly, was I was just really excited to be back in a big city. I know that sounds a bit strange, but coming from New York, I felt very at home in Tokyo, even almost immediately, because of the fact that, you're walking everywhere and, there's all these people around. And Tokyo is such a dynamic city that it's very difficult to get bored. So, everything is just really exciting at the beginning. And then, of course, you sort of go through your, oh my God, what have I done? The grocery store, I'm like constantly Googling things and taking screenshots of, what is this? How do I find, I don't know, baking soda or something like that, right? So you're like constantly, you're trying to figure out all your appliances in the building and in the apartment, and so there's always a bit of sort of growing pains in that, and then you do come out the other side, right? Particularly after you've been there for some time, you begin to really appreciate the some of the differences as well. So I think, one of the things is just really understanding, I guess, some of the cultural differences that are at play so that you can best prepare yourself. I'd say one other thing maybe, which is a bit funny and maybe goes at a bit of my ignorance, but one of my expectations was when we were in Tokyo, I was like, we're going to travel everywhere. We're going to go to Thailand and we're going to go to Australia and New Zealand. And the Pacific Ocean is huge, like huge. And so you start Googling all of these things, and, in being in Japan, Australia is still like a 10-hour flight. Right. So I was like, oh my God, like it's so big. And again, that's maybe a bit of my ignorance, but it's like, you do realize, right, how vast the world is. We still have been able to travel quite a bit, which is, pre-COVID, of course, but which is very fortunate. But it's also, it's also really exciting to explore the cultural elements and the domestic travel where you live as well. So Japan is very rich. The further you go outside of Tokyo, sometimes it's a bit more difficult to navigate in terms of a language standpoint, but it's very rewarding, and you really get to learn about the local people as well. So.
Fantastic.
I'll just piggyback on that Australia thing really fast. Sorry, I just have to, because that was the same reaction I had. I was in a meeting right after we found out we were going, and I'm talking to someone. They're like, well, you got to go to Australia, right? And I was like, well, it's still like a 10-hour flight. And they were like, what? And we had to we literally pulled it up in the meeting, this map of the US or the world. And we were like, where is it? How is it still so far? So I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. I mean, it's far. Japan
It
is very high up, in fact. So which you realize,
But to your point about the learning too, I just want to jump on that for 1 second, because I did leave out, right when we were coming back, there was a lot of the protests in Hong Kong, and which was a big global story. I think over here, even, people were pretty aware of everything that was going on. And it was a really interesting time to be part of that, because, we took my son down to show him, I mean, it was peaceful protests. And so we took him down and we showed him, what it was and why people were doing it. And it was a way to kind of show that they weren't in alignment or agreement with the way things were being run. And he, his takeaway was that he was going to protest bedtime, which was like, oh God. But either way, the idea that, you can really dig into whatever experiences that country has to offer, regardless of what you expect. That, we weren't expecting that to happen, but it was, a really awesome thing that you could still learn from and benefit from if you look at it in the right way. So anyway, sorry, Alex, go ahead. I just wanted to throw that in there as well.
I encourage it. Anytime any of you feel like doing that, please go right ahead. And this was actually a fantastic segue into my next question, and which was going to be, we talked about it a decent bit now, but what were some of the biggest cultural differences that you noticed in the office and out of the office? Now, I know we covered things like workplace hierarchies, as well as coffee shop opening times. So we don't have to go on this for too long, but are there any other big cultural differences that you noticed, or things you had to alter about maybe the way you did work in your new country or old country?
I mean, the only thing I'll just jump in to say is that in some of the places I've been, and Tokyo is an example where you get a lot of yeses immediately, like people will just defer and just answer yes to whatever you're saying, rather than necessarily thinking about it and providing their honest input or feedback. And so you kind of have to be aware that that can happen, and somehow, just make sure that you're getting the real feedback or input that you need, versus just the yes or the agreement, which often happens. So finding different ways of saying things, or asking it multiple times in different ways, and trying to break down some of those barriers so people are more comfortable, because there's definitely a difference. I think Abby mentioned it already, but just not just in hierarchy, but in just overall comfort and willing to share opinions. And I'm sure you guys experience it as well, and just any international group that you guys might have been in, Vanderbilt or anything like that. But yeah, you definitely, that was something that I had to navigate through, for sure.
Yeah, for sure there are spoken and unspoken rules. And I think part of what can, one, you need to be open. I mean, if you're sort of closed and you say, okay, I'm going to do this my way and only my way, then, and not flexible, then, and it's going to be quite difficult for you. But I think it's also very beneficial to, in some ways, become just a student of human behavior, right? Just really observe, constantly be reflecting on, what impact you're having on others, and looking, studying people around you. What do they do? How do they respond? And for some things, and I just speak from Japan in particular. There are, as Nina mentioned, I mean, there are very sort of, a lot of the business that actually happens after work. So you don't really hear the real true feeling of people until you get to drinks after work. And so, you have to, it's beneficial for you to really engage in some of that, and understand how to get things done and how to move things, through informal channels as well. And so, yeah, I think just really studying looking at what other people are doing, asking for advice, for people who have been there a bit longer, really leveraging your network, to help, influence you and give you broader perspective. But, yeah, it can be quite different. So.
Yeah, and I would add as well that in Thailand, and I talked to my American and Thai colleagues about this question, because I think at work, and I guess in any environment, you do want social harmony, and you do want people's feelings not to be hurt. So when Nina mentioned, the reaction is to say yes, but actually there's some personal feelings hidden underneath. That happens so often in Thai culture as well, because the sentiment is to not hurt the person's feeling. You don't want to say no and make them feel uncomfortable, especially because they're not native to this area, or for example. And so definitely, like Abby said, like it's always very, very helpful to just observe and be mindful. And I think the best thing for foreigners to do in any foreign country is to learn the language. I know it seems like a simple thing, but if you learn the local language, that shows that you really care about getting to know the people around you. And it, as a local too, when you see a foreigner trying to learn the language, you feel like, okay, they respect you. They see you as a full human being. They see that you're really trying to just get on the same level as them. That the foreigner isn't just coming in trying to dictate everything that's happening. They're just really trying to get on the same common ground. And so I would say a lot of the cultural differences, like Abby and Nina said, you'll learn by observing and interacting with your coworkers in and out of the office. Especially, I totally agree with Abby on this one, that drinks and like happy hour, if coworkers invite you to that, definitely go, because that's where they'll really tell you the true stories of how they feel about work, how they feel about their own life. And that's a really amazing opportunity to get to know the people around you. And also they have a lot of great tips about places to visit and and recommendations about, local travel. And you'll probably make friends with some of your coworkers and go on trips and things with them. So definitely say yes a lot, I would say. Say yes in the sense that yes to making new friends in your workplace, yes to new opportunities, yes to learning the local language, and just be an observer. I think at Vanderbilt, I remember there's such a big divide, at least when I was there, there's such a big divide between American domestic students and international students. And when Alex had reached out to me about this panel, I kind of like smiled to myself, and I really appreciated the impetus behind this panel, in that Vanderbilt students are thinking more broadly, more internationally. And so just with that potential starting kind of like change in culture, but hopefully at Vanderbilt too, that you should just, as in any setting, I think it might be difficult now with online or hybrid learning due to COVID, but make an effort to get to know the people around you. You don't have to start that by moving to a new country. You can do it anywhere you are. And it's just like Abby said, it's just human behavior. So the more open-minded and the more mindful you are of your surroundings, the more successful you will be in any setting, foreign or at home.
Oh, this is just supposed to be about working abroad. Now I just want to go out and like make new friends and like meet new people and travel and stuff. You guys are inspiring me over here. This is great. And so I know we've talked a lot about, it seems like all of you have appreciated and enjoyed your experiences abroad. But I wanted to ask, and I know we've touched on this a little bit as well, but what were some of like the biggest challenges for you working abroad? And if we want to, I don't know if anyone wants to take the lead, and we can go back to the original order, whatever you like.
I think I jumped the gun earlier, but Kelly, if you want to go first, we can go back to the original order.
No, go ahead, Nina. Go ahead.
Okay, biggest challenges. I mean, for me personally, and I don't know anyone else who may be considering going. I don't know if you do have a family, but challenge number one is, that for me, I felt a lot of pressure to some degree because I'm moving my husband, whose role is not there, right? So he's leaving a law firm behind, and of course he's very open to it. He's really an amazing partner, like Abby, I think, mentioned to hers as well. But still, you feel like I hope everyone likes it. And then my son as well, he's going to be going to school over there. And looking back, of course, totally valued it, but definitely a challenge initially, just to feel like, how do I make sure that everybody's happy and okay and okay over there? So that was challenge number one. And then, of course, there's the work aspects as well. You've got sent over there for a reason, and so delivering on those deliverables and objectives is another added layer of challenge there as well. So trying to assimilate yourself in a new city, but also feel like you need to kind of immediately be having quick wins and still doing all the things that you would be doing in an office in your normal setting. So just balancing that, of course, I think is with any move would be challenging, but I think exacerbated when it's international. Luckily in my situation, Hong Kong is a very English spoken city. And so from a language perspective, you can get by, not just easily, but like almost everybody speaks English to some degree, and most very, very well. And so it's almost unfortunate, because Helia mentioned learning the local language. That was something we really wanted to do. Of course, Cantonese is Hong Kong's local language, and that's like even harder to learn than Mandarin. So challenge number two, learning the language, we did not succeed so well at, but we did pick up, phrases, words, things like that. Yeah, I think those were the biggest kind of immediate challenges for me personally, just moving and dealing with sort of the family stuff as well as the job stuff initially. But I don't know if Abby and Kelly want to call out anything specific on their end.
Yeah, I think mine is similar to Nina's. I think, you know, um, when you bring your family over, and we actually had our daughter in Japan, so we've had various different challenges, but you know, I think when you first arrive and you know, sort of bring your family over, you're nervous that everyone is happy, and then when the company is sending you on assignment, there is pressure, right? Obviously, so to deliver, and just, I think in any work environment too, I don't even think the company's sending you, but you want to make a good impression. You know, you want to add value. You want to feel like you're supporting you know, the work. So I think that, you know, that initially is sort of probably some of the first challenges. You know, then, you know, personally for me, you know, we did have our daughter overseas too. So, you know, and I was one of the first expat women to actually have a child on assignment at Nissan. So, you know, it was pretty rare, in fact, for that to happen. With some of our male colleagues, of course, you know, their wives would have children, but in terms of the female, you know, being on assignment, I was one of the first. So, and the first American, in fact. So it was a bit, you know, that in itself actually created some challenges because they didn't quite know how to handle me, or what to do. But we all, you know, figured it out, and you know, she's now 2, so it's, you know, it seems like ancient history now. But it was, you know, that what did cause some stress, I guess, at the time. And then, so those are maybe more personal sides, but which of course, you know, is important because it in fact impacts your life. You know, from a work standpoint, I think, you know, one of, again, and maybe I go back to the cultural elements as well, but one of the biggest challenges, I guess, is patience. You know, as Americans also, and you know, you want to come and you want to do it, and you want to do it now, and you want to have an impact, and you want the results to be immediate. And it's going to take time, right? It's going to take time to build trust in the culture, to build relationships in the culture, to understand how to get things done. And so in some ways, you have to measure success in a different way. It's not necessarily, you know, getting that, you know, I mean, deadlines are important, right? But it's not necessarily, you know, getting that one task approved, or, you know, having that one thing be successful. But you have to change a way a bit in the way that you measure success, and think about the relationships that you're developing, or the small wins that may be leading to a big one down the road. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges, was actually just sitting back a little bit and you know, having confidence that, okay, I'm building these relationships, I'm doing the work that needs to be done, I'm taking the small steps, and not getting too anxious that, you know, it's not happening right now. So that's, you know, that takes some time, and it's still a struggle, in fact, but that takes some time.
Yeah, and I'll approach this question from kind of a different lens, because a huge movement now in global health and international development is the decolonization of global health. And so the heart of that question, or the heart of that movement, really is, what can, you know, people from the global north, like the Europe and the US, what can people from those countries contribute in global south countries that global south people can't do themselves? So for example, I think Japan and Hong Kong probably aren't part of this equation, because it's definitely not considered a low and middle income country. But for Thailand, our office is 95% made up of Thais, locals. And our company, FHI 360, same thing in our Southern Africa, Western Africa, and Eastern Africa regional offices. Most, like 95% of the staff are local. And so when you're thinking about working abroad, you also have to critically reflect a lot and ask yourself, okay, what skills can I contribute that a local person can't? Or to look at it less negatively, what skills do I have to offer that will allow this company, this organization, to grow beyond thinking locally? So that's kind of another kind of like a personal reflection that I challenge you all as students to think about when you think about working abroad. Because I think, especially in global health, I think less so in the corporate world, but in the international development, nonprofit, and kind of like foundations, donor organizations, a huge part of the discourse right now is around decolonization. And so what does that look like to you as someone who is looking to work abroad? And how are you potentially perpetuating colonial mindsets? And if you feel like you are, how can you address that? So it's more like a personal reflection. I don't have an answer because it's very individual. So, and we can, if any students have ideas or thoughts or want to talk more about this, feel free to reach out to me afterwards as well. But I definitely just wanted to offer that mindset and challenge as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. That's really insightful. So we just have a few more minutes left. And so this is my last question at every informational interview I've ever done, as well as a lot of these panels. And it's pretty much summed up by, what advice would you give to students interested in working abroad? What can they do now to prepare themselves for that?
All right, I guess we've officially changed the order. Okay, my advice would just be do it. So yeah, essentially, if you have an opportunity, I would say definitely take it. Everything is scary until you do it, right? So if you're hesitant because of any concern that you have, just do it anyway. I think coming out of it, the biggest thing for me personally was just a really, if you can do this, then what can't we do, right? So it was almost like once we did this, it just gave me an overwhelming sense of like calm and peace in terms of just my whole anxiety towards my work life or my personal life or the pressure or whatever. Once you sort of do something huge like this and you come out of it feeling like you did well, or you are happy with how it turned out, then it just kind of makes everything seem puts a lot of perspective. I'll just say, it just gives you a better perspective around what matters and what doesn't, and what can we accomplish. And I'm not worried about X, Y, or Z, because in the grand scheme of things, I know it doesn't really matter anymore. And to some of Kelly's points around just having a better understanding of the global struggles of what's going on in the world, and putting that in perspective in comparison to whatever it is that, may be overly consuming others, it just helps to give you such a better understanding of where you fit in the world, and how impactful you can be, and how important it is to stay focused on the right things and all that stuff. So I think for me, perspective was the biggest thing coming out of it. So I would encourage anyone else who has the opportunity to do that, to gain that same experience, hopefully.
Yeah, and I'll maybe touch on two different points. I mean, I guess, if you're an undergraduate today and you're sort of thinking about how do I get there, I think, there's one path, which is, to try to, again, look for a company, right, that has that presence, and that you think that can be an opportunity for you to grow into the future. And then once you get in, really network, make a name for yourself, work hard, obviously, spend some time in the company. So I think a lot of times, and I am in HR, so I look at resumes every day, and I see a lot of people who spend, 1 year, 2 years at a company and then go to a next one. And that does raise some red flags, right? I think still. So build some credibility with a company that you think has potential, and you could see yourself there growing for a bit, and then network within the company to try to find those opportunities. I think particularly for young people who are starting off in their careers, particularly larger companies are doing more of these like shorter assignments, shorter exchanges once COVID improves, right? Volunteer for local or for global projects, raise your name, raise your hand. And then, as Nina said, just do it, right? I mean, it's like someone gave me a good advice that if it's, you know, if it doesn't make you nervous and it's not a little bit scary, then what's the you know, what's the use in doing it? So, you know, the way that you're going to continue to advance yourself professionally, and to give yourself, you know, those opportunities is to stretch yourself outside of your comfort zone. So have confidence in your future self that you can do it. You know, as I think Kelly had a great, you know, reflection, which is also be aware of the value that you bring. Often when you first arrive in a country, it can rock your confidence a little bit, right? You're like, oh my God, you know, am I actually good enough? You know, I'm struggling in these areas. But have that confidence in your future self, you know, make an inventory of the things that you're good at, and keep reflecting on that. So, you know, if you are thinking that you want to do it, you know, now, like straight out of graduation, you want to try to go into into overseas, this also can be a path. And I think, as Nina said, I think, you know, online now there are a lot of resources that can help you navigate how to do that. And to Kelly's point, I think taking the onus upon yourself to learn the local language does go a long ways, and that even can start before you arrive in the country, of course. So, you know, but yeah, so but just do it. You know, it's awesome.
Yeah, I agree completely with Abby and Nina's points. And just to quickly add, because I know all of you are just about to start classes and things are mostly online. So one amazingly incredible tool, but so underutilized, is LinkedIn. And I will say, like, if you're interested in a company, like Abby said, a international, multinational company, definitely start reaching out via LinkedIn. I mentor a lot of global health students, and one of the things I always tell them is use LinkedIn. I've met some of my own, I've made friends, colleagues, and made a lot of mentors, found a lot of mentors through LinkedIn. So definitely use the online platforms that work for you. For me, that's LinkedIn. So just definitely take advantage. Like Abby said, you don't have to wait till you're abroad to get experiences, to talk to people. It's also good for you when you meet someone new, they'll ask you about, tell them more about you, and you'll kind of give them your story. And that the more times, I think, when you share your story and talk to people, the more you grow and the more you understand yourself better. So it's like a personal and professional development. So I will say, yeah, definitely, like Abby and Nina said, go for it and start exploring. Even today, after this panel, like make a LinkedIn profile and start, you know, start exploring even through your computer. So definitely a lot of resources out there. And of course, feel free to reach out to me too after this panel. I'd be happy to help if you're interested in working in global health.
Yeah, Kelly, just to emphasize one more thing, that is so important. I mean, and leverage your alumni network. My husband came to Japan and he quit his job. And the way he found his job that he has here is through his alumni network. And so really leverage it, because, you know, you're a Vanderbilt student, you're a door, you know, people want to help you, and they really do. So don't be nervous about sending that first email. Just, you know, do it and create like a draft one that you can just change the, you know, the name and send it. But really, really leverage your alumni network. So, and that can be, you know, also if you went to a high school that has a good alumni network or something, you can leverage that. So just, you know, that is a key priority. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. That's a fantastic piece of advice to end on, in addition to all the wonderful insights you've shared today. If we could please give like a round of applause. I know there's like a little Zoom hands for our panelists today. I know some of you are coming early, some of you are coming late. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with us all. This has been tremendous. And yeah, thank you all so much. And I know some of you had mentioned sharing emails and things like that. If I have students reach out to me, are you comfortable with me sharing email addresses? It seemed like everyone agreed on that. Just want to get a clear okay on that.
For sure.
Awesome.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Hope you all have a great rest of your night. And yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Thanks for the